Hi, everybody. It's Mr. D at In the Middle with Mr. D1 at blogspot.com. I really appreciate you being here tonight for this special time with our special guest, Carol Krueger. I made a vow in 1989 during my first year teaching when I was failing terribly that if I ever figured out how to teach middle school chorus, I would share it. There was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was none of that stuff. I had no idea how it would happen. And so I'm continuing toward that mission tonight with this special presentation. So I know we're in the middle of assessment season. A lot of you are super stressed. I made a TikTok about it yesterday because it's about more than the rating that you have in the box. It's more about the relationships with the kids that you are making every single day. So just keep that in perspective. And in the TikTok, I share about my first assessment and what a nightmare that was for me. But I learned and I grew and I'm here. So if you're using S-Cubed in your assessment preparation, I would love to see videos. I love getting those videos of you working with your kids and using the techniques. Send them to my email at inthemiddlewithmrd@gmail.com. Make sure you're on my email list for future events like this. Just send me an email and in the subject line, write, put me on your email list at inthemiddlewithmrd@gmail.com. I'm hosting these randomly this year, not as regularly as last year, but I plan to do some more when it feels right. And tonight felt right. So I'm very excited about it. And we have a co-host here. Alden, you want to come on camera real quick? Alden Wagaman is keeping us safe here, and he will monitor the chat throughout. He'll take your questions there. He's letting people in right now, so he may not be able to come on camera just yet, but I really appreciate him. He's going to put some things in the chat about things that are free in my store tonight until 9, as well as 50% off of S-Cubed Mega Bundle until 9 p.m. tonight, and as well as Carol's items so you can find out more and get her information as well. So whenever I do these Zoom events, Facebook Lives over the last decade plus, I offer something free in my store for until 9 at night. Eastern. Tonight, there's some sub plans called Listen to Great Choirs. You can use them as sub plans or as a one-day lesson with your kids. I did Colorado All-State in February, and as I prepared for that event, I wanted to find examples of the 6 songs in the program that I really liked, that really charged me up. And so those 6 songs, the whole program, are in there, and they're sung by other choirs. And I just studied them, and I learned so much. And so you can listen and discuss the things with your students. I talk about the 7 criteria of a great choir in there, tone, pitch, all of those things. And you can have discussions with them about that to help them achieve some of the things you're working for. And another thing I'm working on is musical stuff, musical theater things for your classroom. So there's an assessment for Hamilton the Musical in there. If you've watched Hamilton the Musical with your students, I'm going to be doing more sub plans in the next several months and more things for musical theater because I love it. I just did a Sound of Music unit that is in the store as well, but it's not free tonight. But you can, with Hamilton, just go get that stuff and get the free sub plan thing until 9 tonight as well. If you need the mega bundle, JW Pepper never sells at discount. So that's why I do these events, so you can get them at a discount if you want to during the session. So let's get to why we're here. Carol Krueger, she's an active conductor, clinician, adjudicator, and author. She's conducted festivals and honors choirs at the collegiate, high school, and middle school levels in over 20 states. And she's presented interest sessions, workshops in 30 states, Australia, and England. She's also widely recognized for her work with music literacy, which is why we're here mainly tonight. Oxford University Press publishes her book, Progressive Sight Singing, which is now in its 4th edition. So please welcome our guest, and you can come on camera and unmute when you're ready. And yeah, hopefully you'll pop up on the screen. Are you there?
It says
we'll get you.
Start your video because the host has stopped it.
Uh-oh. Alden, I don't know if you can help me see.
Oh, start my video.
Yeah, there she is. Hey, thank you, Alden. Thank you.
Thank you. You saved the day.
Yes, Carol, thank you so much for being here. I didn't know much about your work before today, before our agreement to do this today. what I knew was that teachers, I would see online teachers say, I go to Carol's workshops and it's a game changer. I've heard that and seen that over and over and over again. And so I thought I need to learn more about Carol Krueger. And so when I reached out to you about a month or so ago, I started studying and learning more about your work. And it's really very similar. We have similar philosophies, similar approaches. And I want to discuss that tonight. So my first question to you is, why did you create progressive sight singing? What was the why?
Well, I've never been lucky enough to have a feeder. So I've
Mm-hmm.
always had to start at the bottom, which means that you're really starting with low-level skills because they didn't have the opportunity in middle school to even sing in a choir. And so it meant that, in fact, I joke about this, that I have taught elementary music at the elementary level, the middle school level, the high school level, and I got a doctorate for the privilege of teaching elementary music at the college level,
Love it.
because so many of our students are not in a system where there's a spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids, I had umpteen books under their chairs. There was
Mm-hmm.
the yellow book and the purple book and the green book, and you could go so far, and then there was a big chasm with the person who wrote it. It wasn't sequential,
Yep.
and the kids would crash and burn.
Yep.
Well, you're not going to get very far in oral skills or literacy if it takes that leap and they can't do it. So
Yep.
I started writing my own
Mm-hmm.
and putting it together just so that it would be a smooth curriculum for them in the classroom. And colleges started calling me saying, Carol, who do you have coming out as a music major? We want your kids because they can read like the wind, they can take dictation, they can do all these things. And so I'll pay money for that kid.
Yeah.
So some of them asked me if they could have my materials, and I gave them the materials. It was a pretty thick book already,
Mm-hmm.
and they sold it in their bookstores at the college, and were using it in their oral skills classes and having great success with it. And so McGraw-Hill saw it, and Oxford University Press,
Mm-hmm.
and they
What year was
contacted
that?
me. Pardon?
What year was that?
1997, maybe at the latest,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
somewhere in there. And then they offered me contracts, but I was doing my doctorate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I did say yes to Oxford.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and then the fun began because
Yeah.
there's a lot to writing a book,
Yeah.
and a lot. And I wanted all the materials and everything for them to have. So
Mm-hmm.
today I've just had a major discussion with Oxford because the new book is out and the website is up, but it's not everything it needs to be yet, but
Right.
they'll have
Right.
it corrected within a week. So you can get all the flashcards for every one of the 52 chapters. You can get all the how to teach the dictation for every one of those
Mm-hmm.
chapters. You
Mm-hmm.
can get improv for every one of them. You can get MP3 files of every one of the patterns.
Mm-hmm.
You can, I mean, the list goes on because teachers need to have those materials ready to go
Mm-hmm.
when they walk into that classroom. They don't have a lot of time. And
Yeah.
so I've tried my best to make sure that that is available to them virtually at no cost,
Yeah.
uh,
That's awesome.
because I believe so strongly that if the teacher begins to teach their kids to be literate musicians,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to skip to work every day
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be a different kind of communication between the students and um, and the teacher. The teacher won't be pushing that train up the hill by themselves.
Yes, I heard you
Every
say that in a video, and I love that because what we want, and you and I met just before this, I think 30 minutes ago for a moment, and we want, I think all of us want, our students not to need us. We want them
right,
to be able to read music. The only thing they should need us for is to help them be musical, and to help them understand, how to take it to the next level. That's what we ultimately want. I want to share real quick some of my journey to why I created SQ, because I didn't get the skills. Like I was in college and I couldn't sight sing.
Mhm.
I remember back then I had a Walkman, and I would record all of the sight singing examples on the piano because I could play piano okay, but I couldn't sight sing. And I would listen to them as I walked across campus, and I would basically memorize them. And then I would go and get the book about 3 days before the test, and I would, look at the examples that I had been listening to. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to go in there tomorrow. When he says do number 52, I can do it. I wasn't sight singing. I would sing on La, and then I would just get an A. I got an A. I just figured out how to get an A. And so that was number one. And then number two, when I went to North Carolina, I started my career in North Carolina, I was failing. They had sight singing examples that were
Yeah.
unison, that were stepwise, that had maybe a dotted half quarter combo. And my students would get to that and they would fall apart completely. And I would just be like, what? And they were not having fun. I would say, pull out the sight singing books, and they would go, ugh. And I was like, I've got to fix it. In New Jersey, where I taught, they had no sight singing requirement. And then I came to Georgia in 2002, and I read the requirements for LGPE, our large group performance evaluation. I could not believe what I saw. It was so advanced. And I called a colleague that I just met and I said, is this for real? And she said, it is for real. I mean, I couldn't have done this my last year master's, a cappella, 3 or 4 parts
Mhm.
with skips as wide as an octave, a dotted quarter eighth combo. I mean, are you kidding? Like, there's no way. And so I went to the first assessment in 2003, and the sight singing judge was so helpful. And she honestly laid the groundwork for me to start to build. I didn't know that's what I was building, S cubed. And then so I wrote a book. Nobody wanted it. Nobody took it. And so then I found the way it should be, which is the way it is. It's just the PowerPoints with the YouTube links to me teaching
It's
it,
grassroots.
all that stuff. And then now I'm just thankful that it's helpful, as I know you are with yours, because it has helped so many teachers. And that's why I was so interested to talk to you. So you said your journey to get it published um, really was kind of organic, right?
It was
Yeah.
really, I was very lucky. They
Yeah.
approached me. I didn't have to sell the book. I didn't have to even write a prospectus or
Yeah.
anything. I
That's
told them,
awesome.
if you want the book, you write it.
Yeah. So
I
many
would,
teachers,
today I wouldn't do that.
right.
But back then I didn't, I kind of laughed at it. I
Yeah.
thought this is funny. But I'm so glad that they saw the value in it. But
Absolutely.
I need to add one thing in here, and that
Good.
is that moving to Florida was probably the greatest gift I got,
Yeah.
because Florida Vocal Association, when I arrived and they said, okay, your kids have to take a written exam in September, complete with error detection, major, minor, augmented, diminished chords, all the intervals in the chromatic scale, and
Mm,
8-measure dictation, melodic dictation, and your kids have to pass all of these elements. And
mm.
sight read at the high school, 48 measures, complete
Wow.
with secondary dominance and the whole thing. And at the middle school level, 24 measures. And I went, what?
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to teach that. But because of that organization,
Mhm.
I said, okay, I got to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to read everything I can. I'm going to have to figure it out because I want my kids to have an opportunity
Yeah.
to experience an all-state. They even have had the first all-state sight reading player.
Like,
Yeah. Your journey through Florida is similar to my journey through Georgia.
Georgia.
I mean,
Yeah.
if I
Well,
hadn't
thank
moved
God.
here, I would not have figured this out.
No, that's correct.
You and I were talking before about another similar philosophy that we have, which is that every single child, beginner, everything, they need to be taught how to read.
Mhm.
And that's your approach, and that's my approach. While we may do them differently, but I think they're very similar, actually. I mean, and yours is, you want to enjoy the process of teaching it.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
do too. I mean, S cubed is part philosophy as much as it is a method. And yours seems that way too when I was watching your video. Can you talk a little bit about like the overall progression, like in a nutshell, of progressive sight
Yeah.
singing?
So I've divided it into a couple of phases. So phase one is all ears.
Mm-hmm.
because you've got to build that. Think of it as a computer and you're building the hard drive. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't put the sounds in and label them, they
Mm-hmm.
don't have a vocabulary to even think about reading with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hardest part to build. The older they are, the harder that is.
Mm-hmm.
Younger, it happens pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so you can't ask them to read something
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have it in their ear. So
Yeah.
you often hear kids say, do me, but they're singing do re.
Yeah.
And you get real quick, okay, this kid doesn't have the vocabulary. Why am I putting reading in front of them? So
Mm-hmm.
that's when I realized that I needed to look more seriously at Gordon's process with having to do all the patterns 3 ways. Neutral, neutral. So when they hear it later without any labels, they know what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like teaching a kid that the kid says meow, meow.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I said to you, give me the sound of an aardvark, you
Mm-hmm.
probably couldn't give it to me because
Nope.
not in your sound vocabulary.
Right.
So then I come back and say, well, then that's my fault. I need to put it in their vocabulary. So
Mm-hmm.
you do it neutral, then you label it with solfege or whatever syllable system,
Yeah.
and then you actually do dictation. I do it on a neutral. You got to give it back to me and label it.
Yeah.
If you can do that, now we're ready to move some steps further. And
Mm-hmm.
I can maybe perhaps begin to show it to you in iconics
Mm-hmm.
rather than going right to notation because they still don't have enough in their vocabulary
Right.
for me to throw them in the deep water. And
Right.
so after I've got that ear going, and they have so many activities and so much that we do
Mm-hmm.
physically and group wise and cooperative learning. And the whole thing is to keep them so engaged with it that there's a constant building of the neural networks in the brain with them.
Yeah. You
And
know,
then phase 2 is reading.
yeah, you talked about the brain before this session, and I really found that interesting. Because again, we just met 30, 40 minutes ago here. So when I was in the classroom teaching S cubed to beginners,
Mhm.
I know this sounds crazy, but I could see their brains awakening.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
could see their eyes looking differently as we layered on each component and skill set and tool for their toolkits as they were able to use them. I mean, I often would rub my belly and tap my head and tap dance at the same time, saying, this is what you're trying to do. And this, we're trying to build these skills for you to get to where you can do it. But you have to layer it. It sounds like you do the same, one thing at a time, and they have to
Amen.
master it. They have to feel successful. That's S Cube stands for successful sight singing. That's what it is. And I want them to be successful. We have to layer it as you do. We have to layer the process. And it sounds like that's exactly what you do in yours so that they can be successful. They're learning language. I remember
Yes.
so many people saying theory, theory, theory. And I'm like, they
Mm.
don't need to understand theory. When you're a 6-year-old, you can say a sentence, but you don't need to diagram it. You don't need to
No.
have verb and noun and this and predicate. None of that needs to happen just yet. You're just trying. Yeah. So I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
No, and also when you take that 6-year-old, they're improvising already. So you even know their vocabulary level. Teacher meets that kid the first time. They know this kid has a huge verbal vocabulary. They meet the next kid who has this kind of a vocabulary. And so the same thing has to take place in music. And improv is absolutely essential. Took me a while to get there because
Mhm.
I was afraid. But when the improv tells me their comprehension, it actually, the list of what it does is amazing. And
Mhm.
it tells me if they're ready to go to reading or not.
Mhm.
So this book, I added the improv stuff in it,
Mhm.
which I'm hoping teachers will grab it and run with it, even though I was never taught how to teach it.
Yeah.
I never had to do any improv in college.
Me either.
No, and so then you get out in the real world and one of the national standards is improvisation and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, is that scat singing? No, it's not that at all. It's having that conversation that you mentioned, with a 6-year-old that they're speaking to you. They understand the syntax. They hear it all because it was all taught orally with the kid.
Mhm. Mhm.
Music is nothing but another language.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
I did the mistakes, I made
Yeah.
them.
Me too.
circle of fifths, what good
Yes,
does it do me? Not a dang thing.
not me either.
Right? And you finally realize I've got to put the sounds and label them.
That's
So,
before, that's when you are fluent,
mhm.
and you need to understand more about the theory behind things. And that's always been my philosophy. I remember sitting in the room and listening to my students sing chromatics after they were, in level 2 of S cubed, and thinking, God, I wish I could have done that. And they have no idea what they're doing. And I'm like, wow, you have no idea what you're doing. And I would always do a cartwheel because I was so excited that they are able to do this.
Oh,
I mean, I part of my whole thing, and it sounds like you're similar, is that success needs to be celebrated. When they're successful, they need to be acknowledged. And it always felt to me like sight singing was drudgery when I was teaching it. It
mhm.
always felt like that when I was learning it. So what are some of the ways that you make in your method that are make it more fun for you and for the people who are learning?
I think first of all, it is the process, and I'm crazy anyway. So I think that's a requirement to be a teacher in
Yeah.
some ways or shapes. Um, and so I have incredible activities and things that, again, some are brain, some are Delcros, some are from other venues that I've adapted to music.
Mhm.
And so it's not just the delivery, but and you'll know when you skipped a step because
Yes.
too many of the kids in the room and you'll go, oh, there's something in between there. I'm going to address one of the questions.
Oh,
So
yeah.
um, one of them said, can she talk a little bit more about Gordon? Okay, there is this wonderful little book that I reread about every 3 years, and I would tell every music teacher, no matter what level you're teaching, you need to read this book. It's
Hmm.
a little book. It's $17 approximately.
Hmm.
You can buy it even probably on used Ways Children Learn Music by Eric Bluestein. He is one of Gordon's students, but what he did is he took a lot of Gordon's material and he boiled it down so anybody could read this. A parent could read this and
Hmm.
understand what's meant by musical aptitude and musical achievement. And I mean, it goes into so many things that I didn't know. For
Yeah.
example, internalizing beat
Hmm.
it will not be done with marching. You
Hmm.
have to do it with the sway of the body. There has to be a shift of weight that affects the vestibular system.
Hmm.
It will go through the process of putting the sounds in the 3 steps in it. It is an easy way to understand how to begin to teach students how to learn music.
Hmm.
Along with that is a whole elementary series of Jump Right In. It's out for the general music, but it's also out for band. It is out for orchestra. It's out for piano. And everything is a sound approach before it ever goes to the eyes.
Hmm.
It's a phenomenal one. In kindergarten, those kids are singing in all the different modes and major and minor. And they're even doing asymmetrical meter because
Hmm.
they can.
Yeah.
So it opens your eyes as a teacher,
Hmm.
thinking, oh my gosh, I couldn't do any of this in college because
Same.
I wasn't really taught well. Well,
Yeah.
that's crying over spilt milk. So
Oh, yeah.
what you have to do is just, buckle it down and start to read
Hmm.
and figure out, oh my gosh, and if I sequence it this way, this has been proven, this has been studies done on it. And
Hmm.
so you end up hopefully not making quite as many mistakes as
Right.
plowing ground by yourself. But I would tell everyone start here.
Yeah.
And
I'm not,
then
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and then think about coming to a workshop where you're going to get a huge dose of it. It's
Yeah.
like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
They all tell me.
Well, I've heard it over and over, and that's why we're here tonight, because I didn't know much about your approach until we decided to do this, as I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier. So, I firmly believe that our approaches are very similar, and I love that. And Alden, are you monitoring the chat? Are there any questions I'm missing?
Yeah, I'm trying to read a little bit too, so just jump in when I'm supposed to
You
do
guys,
something.
whenever if we're talking and you have questions, please feel free to either come on the mic and talk or write it in the chat, either one, whatever you're comfortable doing. I want to make sure that you get questions answered. And I watched, as I mentioned, one of your videos, and you talked about marching. and you just spoke about that, and then swaying. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I don't
Sure.
understand the marching piece.
Okay, so when you march, you are not affecting the vestibular system in your inner ear,
Mm-hmm.
which has to do with your balance and everything, and it's how you actually internalize beat. And
Mm-hmm.
so unless there's that kind of emotion
Mm-hmm.
or this motion forward and back,
Yeah.
where it's actually being affected in your
Mm-hmm.
inner ear, you can see kids who've been in marching band for many, many years, and they have not internalized beat
Yeah.
because and also because we have kids sit in their chairs way too much.
Yeah.
They need to constantly be moving. So
Mm-hmm.
I figured out real quick when I'm teaching high school who have no skills or
Yeah.
college who have no skills,
Mm-hmm.
first thing I'm going to have them do is they're going to walk what I call a heel march through their entire, almost the entire rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be using large motions with weight from the upper arm.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it's great if
Mm-hmm.
you put in 2 barbells in your hands and you
Mm-hmm.
start really doing your patching, you will
Yeah.
build muscles of steel. But
Yeah.
the most important thing is that it's affecting the vestibular system in their inner ear.
Right.
So when I read this little book and it says marching and clapping will not internalize beat, I
Yeah.
went, well, dang, how many
Yeah.
years have I done that? And
Totally.
so it's, there were lots of things in here that I had an awakening, and you kind of go, wow, I wish I had known that because I was doing the best I could do.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm constantly reading the new research. I'm reading brain books. I'm
Yeah.
doing whatever I can to expedite the process,
Mm-hmm.
help teachers not maybe make as many mistakes as I've made along the way.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and believe me, I mean, the I'm probably the queen of having done it wrong before I figured out there's
Aim.
a better, more efficient way to do it. And that's why I welcome people to come because uh, you're going to hear that almost every one of those mistakes I made, but it's
Mm-hmm.
from those mistakes you learn.
Yeah, failure is the best
Yes.
teacher. You
Yeah,
know,
it is.
you mentioned earlier about how the methods that you were looking at skipped steps, and I've said this in my workshops for years. For middle school, for example,
Mhm.
I every method that I saw would start in the key of C,
Yeah, you
and
can't.
yeah, and those kids don't understand a ledger line. They don't
Right.
understand D below E, and they would get confused. And then it would go to the key of G or F, and it would be, it's too high. And then they would be so nervous to even sight sing. So a lot of people, and when they use S cube, they're like, what? Because I don't do keys until later, like
Much
way
later.
later. There,
I use the little box.
I want them so comfortable
Mhm.
singing in I use something called varied but comfortable do for the first many weeks. Like we do C, C sharp, D sharp, E, F a little sometimes, but I want them to feel comfortable and confident that they are able to do this and they're building those skills and their confidence. That's what's so important. When they go to G and it goes up to D or even higher, all they're thinking is it's too high and
Yeah.
and it doesn't make any sense, and they don't know what keys are anyway. Like
No.
seriously, I've taught probably 10,000 children in my career because I had so many large programs. I never once had a single child in my classroom say to me when we were singing really in the key of C, but it was the key of E or whatever, they would never say, that's not an E. They never said that when I was doing very but comfortable do because they don't, it's not how it rolls. I mean,
No.
the children who have relative pitch, who are kids who are very highly trained, and or they have a natural gift.
Right.
That's what I think. I'm teaching one online right now, but she's a violinist, she's a pianist, and she's been told she has perfect pitch. She's 9. She doesn't. I mean, I know. I mean, but it's close. It's very close. It's very good pitch. It's really strong. But the keys don't really matter that much.
Well, and when you're teaching changing voices,
Oh yeah.
today you may only have 5 notes at work or maybe less. And so how it appears on the page is not a big part of it um,
Hmm.
at all. The interesting thing, I'm going to go back to one more thing in this little
Yeah.
book.
Please.
Um, so I studied some with Lois Chalksey, and
Hmm.
and she wrote an article in 1969 that said, do not teach Every Good Boy Does Fine and FACE and all the other
Mhm.
problems because it splits it into two separate entities and never puts it back together into a hierarchy pitch.
Mhm.
It also then creates problems with ledger lines and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So, basically it is, she said, she wrote in the article, you might as well, it's just minutia. You might as well have taught them to wiggle their nose and their ears. And I thought that was,
Mhm.
wow, a great saying. He comes into it here and as well. And so when I do go to the staff, we start first of all with space notes. Space notes are easier for students to perceive than line notes because they've been writing in the space their entire life.
Yeah.
So you just need one line. So that means you have a space note, a line note, and a space note. So if I call this dough, the space note dough, what would the line note be? Oh, it'd be Ray. What would be about that? Me. And so we just move it all over. It
Mhm.
doesn't take them long to be able to read in just about any place in any clef
Yeah. Yeah.
because they're not like me, where
Yeah.
I put into that pigeonhole,
Yep.
and so I'm sorry, but C clefs, the alto clef, and some of those still send me over the edge,
Yeah.
where my students can read in anything because they weren't taught those crazy things. And
Right.
I can't remember, is that all cows eat grass or is
Right.
that, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh,
It doesn't
and
make any sense. I
yes, and
remember
why
like
do we
also
do that?
I remember realizing there were so many moments of realization as I taught my kids, including that C was hard for them to see, middle C, and D was hard for them to see. And then we got like, and this is why S cubed is laid out the way it's laid out, because I just start on the staff, I don't even do C for a while. When we teach ledger lines, I teach them to see it. I teach them to see the C and then the D. I also recognized sometime in my career that a B on the treble clef going to an A when the stem changes really sends them over the
Sends
edge.
them over the edge.
And so, I mean, they would all, if it went like from B to A and then back to B, they would be like, and the stems were different. They would say like do, re, just because the stem was up. I mean, it's just all kinds of, and I was like, why do you think that's re? And they're like, well, it looks higher, but because to them it does.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I use flashcards like this that I've made
Yeah.
that have a box. But before we ever get to this,
Mm-hmm.
we're reading in iconics. So
Mm-hmm.
I have them all done in graphs and they'll see the do, re, and the whole step between them.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the staff, you don't see major thirds and minor thirds. They all look the same.
Yeah. No.
That has to be taught. So I
Yeah.
use a lot of iconics, which is Bruner. And
Mm-hmm.
so Bruner passed away in 2016, but he was still holding office hours and he was over 100 years old. And
Wow.
so his research and everything is really fascinating. And
Mm-hmm.
it validated all of the iconics that I'd been using and
Mm-hmm.
teaching. So I
Mm-hmm.
would include to say to people, train the ears, read in iconics
Mm-hmm.
because the musical notation has no meaning for them yet, and
None.
their ears aren't strong enough
Yeah.
to take and go to the notation. There's plenty of time down the road.
Right.
Uh, and so if you were to look at my book, you'll see a lot of iconics in there. You'll
Mm-hmm.
see online, there's flashcards of all the iconics for you. And
Mm-hmm.
for rhythm, I use longs and shorts
Mm-hmm.
because you can see the difference. We do them
Mm-hmm.
in our hands. We do
Yep.
cooperative learning with them. And then I place eventually the notes under those long and shorts
Yeah.
because the other thing I don't want my kids to only read in quarter note gets the beat.
Yeah.
How many conventions have I gone to where the full of people who have music degrees and you
Mm-hmm.
give them two as the bottom number and it's not good. And
Yeah.
so my kids help me figure out how would it look if the quarter note was my ta? How
Mm-hmm.
would it look if the half note was my ta? And the
Mm-hmm.
one they love the most, how would this look if the whole note was my ta?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? They'll help you figure it out because it's nothing but simple X equals. They'll
Mm-hmm.
read in all kinds of meters with
Mm-hmm.
no problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's not people who've been trained like I was.
Right. And like I was too, I think I
Yeah.
had some piano training. Did you have some piano training?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's one thing when you're trained, when you take some piano lessons, and I'm not that good. But I had that you're touching something.
It's
And
tactile.
it's tactile and you're touching something, and so you maybe can sight read ish, but it's not the same as sight
No,
seeing. It's a completely
totally
different
different.
skill.
Mhm.
And to that's why like I had never used solfege like in college. we didn't use solfege. I was just singing law. As I said, I
Same
memorized
here.
my sight singing
Mhm.
examples. I was not sight singing. And then when I was struggling so hard with my students who were beginners, all of them, I waited for Mozart. He never showed up. You know, and I was like, I've got to learn solfege. I need to learn I took Kodai. I'm like, I've got to learn solfege. So I started playing a game with solfege, and then I got comfortable with solfege.
Mhm.
And you mentioned in our pre-show that we're lifelong learners. And so I was probably in my 30s at that point when I was like, I need to learn solfege with the kids. I need to not be afraid to learn solfege with them, even though I could read music for days. So I learned, and then I did these follow the hand exercises and things. And now I'm completely fluent with the hand signs. It's no
Yeah.
problem. And they are very fluent because they're younger and their brains, are quicker on absorbing that. But it's so helpful, the tactile piece. Like in I don't know if you use anything like this in your program, but like for me, one of the skills that we teach is like they've got to pulse all the time. Like if it's, they're just constantly pulsing, but to get them to do that at first, like they just want to do this without any of the
Yes.
pulsing, and they're not with the rhythm, right? But it's not easy. Again, it's like this with the tap dance at the same time for them, but you build sets the skills slowly, and it doesn't feel like that to them. If you let them get it, master it, feel successful, move to the next thing.
I knew when I moved to Florida that I had to figure this out if I
Yeah.
wanted my students to be successful. So I did do and go to a lot of different workshops and things. And I eventually went to a 3-week workshop with Erzsébet Hegyű from the Hungarian Institute. And I was not fluent in solfege, and I was the only one in the room not fluent in solfege.
Wow.
And we were reading in, oh my God, modes and everything. But
Yeah.
it was baptism by fire. Um, but I found, and I had already done a bunch of Kodai stuff, but
Mhm.
going and working with her, she made me want to read more of Kodai's materials that he had written,
Mhm.
and um, and really understand more of his philosophy, because there was a big translation difference between how they perceive it over there and how it ended up here in this country.
Yeah.
So yes, let me just tell you, uh, hand signs are my friend. I
Mhm.
use them all the time.
Mhm.
When I start doing my patterns and
Mhm.
I'm doing them on a neutral, I don't say a word. I'm doing all the hand signs. I just ask them to mimic me. I
Yeah.
never say to them, this is do. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, the kid will say, hey, every time we sing do, you do this. No, really?
Yeah. That's
Because it's
perfect.
much better if they discover it and figure it out rather
Yeah.
than trying to swallow all of it.
Mhm.
I do believe in hand signs. Gordon does not. He
Mhm.
believes, because worked with little kids, he felt that they didn't need him. And they probably didn't, because
Mhm.
he was using it as a part of the vocabulary from very young age.
Mhm.
But most of the kids I get are upper elementary, middle
Yeah.
school, high school, college, adults.
It's
And,
different.
and this gives you a solid, where is that pitch?
Oh, it was a game changer for me.
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
totally.
they were, as I mentioned earlier, in North Carolina, it was unison stepwise, maybe a dotted half quarter combo. And I was not doing any pulsing, and I was not doing hand signs. They would
Right.
get to measure 4, going to measure 5, completely fall apart, as I mentioned. And I would just stand there and I would clap because I was like, the beat, trying to keep the beat. And it was just so uncomfortable and awkward. They felt like complete and utter failures. It's because they didn't have I wasn't doing any
Oh,
hand signs. I wasn't doing solfege. I think they were singing on ooh or something.
everything was just out here.
Yeah.
It didn't have anything concrete. I
Right.
also do a lot of motions for meter, because
Mm-hmm.
I get real tired of hearing the pounding of the beat.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting bands, choirs, everything. It's just the pound of the beat. There's no phrasing to it, which is
Mm-hmm.
the other reason why I do so many patterns, because I'm actually teaching them musicality along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a meter of 2, it is, I hope you can see this,
Mm-hmm.
it's strong, weak, and I'm crossing the bar line,
Mm-hmm.
because the other thing our kids do is they stop at every bar line.
Yeah.
And you've got to try to get them to follow it and go
Yeah.
across. 3 is strong, weak, weak. So when I'm doing rhythmic
Wow. Nice.
patterns, I'm doing this. 4,
Yeah.
strong, weak, semi-strong, weak,
Yeah. That's
the
great.
bar line.
Yeah.
And so I have all kinds of fun activities to do with it.
Mhm.
And we alternate back and forth between the pulsing because that's the beat and what we call macro and micro beat.
Mhm.
I also want them to be very, very comfortable with the feeling of meter because
Mhm.
it's the meter that helps give us the musicality.
Yeah.
We've all had the kids when they sing Alleluia and
Yes.
the other things, it's
Yes.
because they're not even aware
Yeah.
of metric feeling. And
Yeah.
so I do a lot of physical work with trying to give them something concrete
The
for what
kinesthetic.
that meter is.
It's the kinesthetic
Yeah,
thing that is so
totally.
critical to teaching sight singing and also to musicality. I mean, I saw a teacher that we interviewed last year on Zoom, Ask Mr. D, Alicia Moreno Malloy in Alabama. She's an amazing middle school teacher. And when I watched her students sing, I saw, and I know that some people are going to be like, they shouldn't be doing this. They were singing for the adjudicators, and there was some movement, and it wasn't choreographed, but they were moving
I
a
don't have
little.
a problem with that at
I
all.
don't either. But a
It
lot of
keeps
people are
the
so
breath
purists.
moving
They're
as
like, they
well.
need to stand completely still. But
No.
she
Mhm.
was giving them all of this wonderful stuff, and they were singing with passion.
Yes.
And it was because
And
she
line.
had to feel, right? I have seen, and I'm sure you have too, so many very clean, very safe
Yes.
performances in adjudications. It's a one, congratulations, but there's no emotion. There's no they're just standing there with nothing.
They're
And
robots.
they are scared to move. And
Mhm.
I feel so strongly, like when you mentioned this about sight singing, it's not just about that. It's about like really putting that into your literature, really, and allowing
Totally.
them to be free so that they are not robots. It makes me insane to see those safe performances. I'd rather you take a risk. I'd rather you
Yes.
make an error, push a little bit too much, and then okay, all right, we can go back, because the kids, especially middle, they're so afraid unless we empower
Being
them.
accepted.
Yeah, and being accepted and being different, or and
Mhm.
and and so many middle school teachers talk about not being able to get energy out of their students. And I think the movements, even in your
Oh,
sight
God.
singing example, it's critical. Like, just get them to move in a way that is comfortable for them, and that means
But it
something.
internalizes elements of the
Yeah,
music and of and connects back to their ears as well,
yeah,
and
yeah.
eventually to their eyes. Another thing, I think I'd really like to stress in this little chat here is
Mhm,
the importance of not just teaching isolated musicianship,
mhm,
but that musicianship must be applied to your literature. And
mhm,
if it isn't, then you're teaching them, oh, we put that away over here, and now we're
mhm.
going to do the real music.
Right.
Instead, I want my kids to, I'm going to give them pieces that they can read and hear 60% of it
Mhm,
already, or hopefully 80.
mhm,
And I'm going to never have to touch the piano. It's not
mhm.
a part of my classroom at
Yeah.
all.
Mhm.
It's the wrong kind of role model for vocal production.
Yeah.
And I want them to be able to hear it from every direction, but so important that they apply it. So when I pick a piece of literature, I've gone through, I know every tonal pattern in it, every rhythm pattern in it. I know all the chord progressions, and I have figured out how to put up all the chord progressions in iconics.
Mhm,
So even elementary kids will learn secondary dominant chord progressions from me, and
mhm.
they'll hear them with their ears because, again, it's
So
giving them vocabulary, which is kind of cool to see. But if teachers out there have never really applied this to your literature, please give me an email. I'll send you some examples
mhm,
and pick literature that the students can actually learn and figure out as though they were sitting under a tree, rather
mhm.
than me spoon feeding it over
Yeah.
and over. And
Mhm,
then we wonder why there's no spontaneity from them,
mhm. Yeah.
because we have literally said, roll over rover, roll over rover, roll over rover. And after 47 times, they actually might sing it.
Yeah.
And so that's not teaching.
Mm-mm.
And so there has to be application of the skills directly to the literature.
Mhm,
So I have in my dossier, I think 125, maybe 150 pieces that I've completely done into a curriculum map. And
mhm,
I gladly share that with anybody to help them bridge the gap between here we are working with our literacy skills.
Mhm.
And now we're going to apply it to our literature
Mhm.
because that's the most important thing. I
Yeah.
hate it when I hear them sing a really hard piece on stage and it's not necessarily well done.
Yeah.
They come in and they can't sing a two-part piece.
Yeah.
Well, that's the ego of the
Yeah.
teacher talking
Yeah.
on stage
100%.
and not the teacher meeting the needs of the student.
Yeah, I
Students
feel
come first.
exactly the same way. I saw last week in Alabama a teacher do with sixth graders beautiful unison pieces.
Mhm.
I don't remember what they were, but they were. She had a nice beat one and a nice slower one. She was using syllabic inflection beautifully with those.
Yes.
She was doing crescendos and decrescendos with those sixth graders, beginners, first time with them. And
Yeah.
she made those choices, which were so smart. She built the foundation. She's building the foundation. She's not, there was like maybe one little two-part split here or there, but very rare. But the detail work. And I think choir teachers feel so much pressure. I've heard so many times, I have to do whatever grade 5 music. I don't know
No,
what
you
that means.
don't.
You don't. I mean, what does
No.
it mean? And if they can't do it, or if you're doing it at the expense of them learning to read music, you're not spending the time. You're just, it's not going to help. Like
And you can't
ultimately,
give them another piece of music
Mhm.
that they can do. If
Yeah,
they can't do it on their own, we would fire a math teacher who did that.
yeah,
Think
at the
about
absolutely. But I need to say, as we are winding this down, I want to say to teachers to, just, you have to do what the kids can do. You have to understand that it is a language that they're learning. We have to
Mhm.
get out of the idea that of our own training, like we learned piano or we learned some instrument. But we're teaching beginners. Most of us are teaching beginners, and
At
we are.
all levels and ages.
Yes, absolutely. As you said
Yeah.
earlier, I love what you said. Say it one more time about how you've spent your whole career.
Teaching elementary music
Yeah,
at
to
every
college,
level along the way.
to
Look,
elementary.
even my graduate students didn't have a good foundation in skills.
Yeah,
So
I didn't.
you have to go back and help them. It's not their fault. And in
Yeah.
fact, how are they ever going to truly be successful
Hmm.
and not doubt themselves if
Yeah.
we don't fill in their gaps?
Yeah.
I have gaps yet I'm still filling in.
Still same.
And so there is no shame in unison. There
Hmm.
is no shame in not doing 47 parts with your choir.
Or correct.
Badly, might I
Yeah.
add.
Right.
Much better that it's beautiful and musical, and they can transfer that to their next piece.
Yeah.
It's just like a language arts teacher tries to get every kid to read fluently in their
Mhm.
classroom.
It
And
is.
they work very hard at that.
And it takes time and
Yes.
deliberate, intentional things and processes. Ray has her hand raised. Ray, would you like to ask on camera, or
Oh,
I see, are you there, Ray?
Yes, I'm here. I'd like to leave my camera off,
No
because I'm
worries.
a person who is blind, and so I don't think I've angled the camera very good.
Don't worry.
But but my thought is I completely agree with not always having the foundation. Um, when you're an adult, I can remember in college, I had seen 6/8 before, but we had these theory tests where we had to do fill in the meter, and
yes,
I had such a hard time understanding that because my teacher told me that 6/8 was 6 beats.
it's not.
Yeah.
And so I
You're not
had
the first one.
to unlearn,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
6/8 is the macros too.
Mhm.
And I can remember that. My question is about Takadimi.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, so my choirs are used to count singing. My more advanced choirs are, but I'm not. And I've been working with them on it because I know it makes them more comfortable. But I'd like to transition them into using the Takadimi system. I'm used to tas and titis, so I'm wondering. I like your system because it puts the ta is always on the beat.
On the beat. It
Uh,
helps with taking dictation and everything.
uh,
Okay, so I get where you're coming from. And let me say this, I went away from count singing after singing with Shaw a lot. It is the hardest thing on your throat that there possibly is. And when they stop singing, they still haven't internalized the beat. And so he still had some of the very same problems. I give him thumbs up for what he did back in the 40s. And so I would just tell you vocally, it's not a really good thing to do at all. Plus, all of those counts are diphthongs. And if I'm trying to build a beautiful tone with my students, everything I do on those diphthongs undoes all of my beautiful tone work that I'm working on. So Takadimi is all pure vowels. It has none of those diphthongs in it at all. It keeps an open throat. So it releases so much tension. And the other thing, count singing causes lots of tongue tension. You won't find that if you start to use Takadimi. Takadimi was developed by 3 theorists for use in the instrumental field at first, because it teaches tonguing with all of it. So
oh,
yes, I'm a real proponent of Takadimi. I mean, because it tells you where everything is, and it does nothing to undo the development of beautiful tone. It only enhances it and helps it. And it is an oral-based beat function system. So when my kids hear it, they know exactly what it is. That is not the case with Ta Titi. So the top Kodai educators moved to Takadimi about 2002 to 2005. And so Kodai today, written by Taka and Houlihan, it's about this thick. It is all Takadimi. And the progressive Kodai people moved to it more than 20 years ago.
Got
But
it.
you still see those who are afraid to try new things. And
Yeah.
that brings us to, what is a teacher? We're a role model for being a lifelong learner. And so I'm always learning new things so
Mhm.
that my kids, when I ask them to learn to do something different, they've seen me make mistakes. They've
Mhm.
seen me pick myself up, dust myself off, try it again. Gee, nothing terrible happened to me because I
Mhm.
made a mistake, but I'm learning. And
Yeah.
so I would encourage you to come learn more about Takadimi.
Mhm.
Is it perfect? Close. Those 3 theorists teaching compound and simple happens like this.
Yeah.
It's intuitive with it.
I
And
need to learn that. I've heard so many good things about it. I definitely need to
I
learn
wish
that.
I had developed it, but I
I
didn't.
know, I know. Oh, Alden, you said there's some good questions because we're coming up on the end here, and
Okay.
I'd like to respect people's time. Could you tell us what those questions are and we can get those answered?
Yeah, there was I guess is one question. Someone says, I teach middle school. How would you go about deprogramming incoming elementary students who have been drilled on the FACE in this
I
space?
know. Just say you're in middle school now, and we do it things slightly differently, and we're going to learn it from another direction. You're smart. You're going to love doing it
Mhm. And,
because I
and
don't want,
just do it. Just do
yeah,
it. I mean, that in elementary, they only have it once a week, maybe
yeah,
twice a week. So when
like,
I would get
yeah.
my middle school kids, I would be like, I'm just pretending that they're complete beginners, and they are. So anything else there, Alden, that we need to address?
Let's see here.
Somebody said, what will you explain what you mean by spiral?
Oh, it's okay. So in both the rhythm area and the tonal area, there is step by step what needs to be done, what needs to be introduced first, second, and third. But then it's also that you approach it first with the ears. You don't go to the eyes for a while
Yeah.
till that vocabulary is part of who they are.
Yeah.
And that can take a bit of time. By the way, I teach a ton of rote songs.
Yep.
And in the rote songs, there's never text. Because if
Mhm.
you use the text, they'll pay attention to the text and not the
Right.
intrinsic musical elements.
Yep.
And every time we sing, we do something else with it
Mhm.
that begins to explore it. And
Yep.
so I would tell you that um, while I'm waiting for those ears to develop,
Mhm.
my kids are learning a ton of rote songs that we then return to and
Yep.
figure out ostinatos. We figure out descants for it.
Yep.
we write songs for our next concert
Yep. Yep.
because they're not quite ready to go to it being um, all in notation.
Yeah.
And so you can't move to that before they're ready, or you're asking for it to become a laborious
Yeah.
teach. And that's not, I want it to be enjoyable and for them to love it.
Yes, that's so critical. It's so critical in my process. I don't call it spiraling, but I'm doing spiraling. We're building skill sets step by
Mhm.
step. I was a gymnast. You get level 1, you master these skills for level 1. You don't go to level 2 until you've mastered those skills. And then that's it. But it's obviously got to be enjoyable, and it's enjoyable when they master it. And I know in my own program, I use competitive pieces. I use competition. I use to incentivize. I use games. It's gamification. Everything to make it not feel like learning. That's the most important piece.
Disguised learning.
Right. Yeah. So what keys do you start in for sight singing? Ray is asking.
Okay, I tend, depending on the age, but if I'm with high school kids or treble middle school, I'm probably in the key of D, the key of E flat. F is never a good key for anybody because of the ethos of it. And so I would keep it in that area. I might do some G. It's going to depend on how the piece sits as to where I am. Because if it's on Do and goes down to low So, I may very well be in the key of G or the key of A because of how it sits. And I change it a lot.
Yeah, same.
And
I don't want them to be fixed Do.
no, oh no,
So
no.
as I'm working through my program, as I mentioned earlier, it's C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, and then we move once they've built the skill sets and they're comfortable, then we do the real keys. And as I mentioned earlier, everybody's like, I can't imagine that they wouldn't think that that's an A flat. They don't know. They don't know. And you have to understand that it's just like when you're 6 years old, you don't know that you're using a verb or a noun or a predicate.
No. Somebody asked, what about the key of F? All you have to do is do a Google on the ethos of all the keys. The key of F sings flat. And it's never been a key, and a lot of music is written in it because it's easier for the pianist, but it seldom sits well for the singer. So you better to move it then to the key of G flat or F sharp, or move it down to the key of E. And so all of a sudden it'll click, it'll fit right with your kids, but often the key the music is written in does not fit that group. It is not, they don't own it. It will sing under the pitch because of where it lies in that. Every key has its own color. And this goes all the way back to medieval times. So F is not a good singer piece.
Yeah.
And again, it's great for pianists, but it would be far better if my kids were singing it in F sharp. So it's a brighter sound. It's more forward. It sits in a different place. Even your passagios and everything will change in that. And so I would tell you to experiment with it because the piece may not be tuning because the key that it sits in comparison to where their natural passagios are.
Yeah.
I hope I explained that pretty quick.
You did. Carol, listen, I appreciate meeting you tonight and having you with us. I've learned, and I hope that people will investigate your workshops because I've heard so many times how wonderful they are,
Well,
and how
thank you.
helpful
That's
they
sweet of
are.
you.
And it's so interesting to realize as I've studied your work how similar our approaches are. Really, I mean, they're different, but they're the same. The approach, the mental thing about sight before sound, all of it. It's a good, and there are so many ways to skin the cat, I guess to say, which is a terrible thing to say because I love my cat. There's so many ways to do it, and there are people in this room tonight who are years down the road going to develop it because we all kind of develop our own thing, right? Like you use this, you take from this, you take from this.
Oh yeah,
Some
it's
people are
eclectic.
going to create something new from what you've done and what I've done. And anyway, I loved meeting you. I hope we get to meet in person one day.
Yeah, I would like that very, very much. And
I'm sorry I didn't sleep last night. She told me she didn't sleep last
hey,
night.
the bottom line is, I think everybody who attended is probably doing their best to already teach music literacy and things. Wouldn't it be great if every one of us went out and found 5 more people that we encouraged them to add that into their program and to develop a spiral, you know, a step-by-step approach so
Mhm.
that our kids are finishing and they're musically literate.
Yeah.
I believe we would see more people singing in church choir.
Yep.
We'd see more community choirs being healthy. But you know, if it's all rote teaching over and over and over again, I'm not sure I'm willing to go to work all day and then go to a community choir where they're going to bang the heck out of those parts.
Yes.
That's not enjoyable. But when
No.
you are involved with the process of making the music, you understand it, you hear it, it's a part of you, and it's a conversation almost. You
Mhm.
walk out of there with endorphins like crazy, but
Mhm.
you're not walking out with endorphins if you've been beat to death on that tenor part for the 27th time.
Yeah, and it's not enjoyable over and over
No?
when you're missing this note or that note. Alden just shared where you can get in touch with Carol Krueger and do her
Oh, you
workshops
did?
all summer
Okay,
long.
good.
It's in the chat, and I'm going to put this up on YouTube for people. I hope they find it useful later. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you, Alden. Thank you again. Good luck at your adjudication on Saturday. You're doing the real work, and we are going to end this meeting. Everybody have a great night.
Kudos to you for embracing music literacy. Kudos to you for giving your kids the joy and I guess I would also say the ability to make music out under a tree on their own, that you just didn't teach them by rote 42 songs, but they can't duplicate it on their own. You gave them what every music teacher should be giving them. Too bad we weren't all taught about how to process this
Right.
and help our students. But you're just like me, we're plowing ground. Hopefully some more of these people will plow some ground with us. Thanks
They
for the
will.
invitation. It
Absolutely.
was actually non-stressful.
Good. I'm
And
so
you look
glad.
dang good.
Thank
I
you.
want to look like you when I grow up.
Anyway, yeah. Well, as I told you, I've had a little help. All right. Take
Hugs
care.
to you. Thank you all. Thanks everybody for coming this evening.
Absolutely. All right.